so I've been playing Sonic Advance. Now, when reviewing a Sonic game, you're supposed to start with an introductory tale about the franchise as a whole. You could even add a joke or two where you say things like, "Sonic, he's made some good games, but also a few not so good games." And then you can do that thing where you slide the cover of Sonic 06 onto the screen and make one of those awkward no-chin faces that Egoraptor always does. And after that, you could surprise people by zooming in really quickly and adding a few explosions and air horns. All to hide the fact that you'll never be as funny as JonTron. Boo boo boo. And once you're done, you could probably hard cut to some gameplay footage and go on about some nostalgic tale about what the franchise means to you. And, well, what the franchise means to me isn't really a whole lot. I played Sonic 2 on the Sega Mega Sys, but he got kicked out rather quickly in favor of Crash Bandicoot because I'm not like old and stuff. However, there is a Sonic game that I do remember quite fondly, and that game is the one I'm reviewing today. Ooh. Sonic Advance is the first ever Sonic game on a Nintendo console. There were a few ports beforehand, sure, but this was the first game to be newly made specifically for a Nintendo system. And considering the history that Ninty and Sega share together, this was a pretty big deal. In 2002. I mean, all the Sonic games I played were on Nintendo consoles apart from Sonic the Hedgehog Trimmer 2, and most of the aggressive advertising that Sega did was all aimed at American audiences. So, I never really thought much of it. But still, to downplay everything that happened between these two companies would be doing the significance of this game a great disservice. Hell, even the fact that I'm talking about it right now, despite the fact that it means very little to me, shows that this was a pretty significant moment for both Sega and Nintendo. And also, just about every review or article about this game that I could find mentioned the importance of this at length. So, I should probably just stop adding to the noise and actually do my fucking review now.
The story of Sonic Advance is about the evil Dr. Eggbot McMahon-Man, who once again stole the Chaos Emeralds or some shit like that.
But then, Obama chuckled,
You mean the Chaos Emeralds?
and then Sonic and his friends came and explosions happened, but not really, and then the title screen. Now, of course, there's this whole debate about Sonic not being good anymore and whether or not he was actually good to begin with. And I kinda agree with the idea that the series' gotta go fast marketing theme kinda contrasts with the level design right from the get-go, which resulted in a lot of schizophrenic game design in the later titles, desperately trying to make shit gel together while delivering on the empty promises of a world gone by. I mean, the 2D games all had a very maze-like approach to level design, and while that was certainly quite different from Mario and also rather original in its own right, it didn't always make for very elegant platforming. Not to mention the block puzzles and swing sections. And sure, while there were a lot of slopes and loop-de-loops and revving up and blasting away was most certainly possible, I'd still say that the maze-like levels and the way the camera was positioned, always putting Sonic in the center of the screen, didn't necessarily encourage you to go fast. Yep, also, none of the bosses ever had speed as a central mechanic either, or even as a theme. I mean, if Gunstars could have shit like this happening, then why couldn't Sonic? But Anyway, if you didn't know this for some reason, Sonic Advance is a 2D platformer. Just like Mario, Sonic can jump on his enemies to kill them, and instead of mushrooms, Sonic can pick up rings to act as a form of health. As long as Sonic is holding at least one ring, he can take damage, but getting hit without rings will cause him to die and lose a life. Once you're out of lives, it's game over and you have to restart from the very beginning. Now, if you're like playing The Witcher 3 or something and you're about 30 hours in and dying would take you back to the beginning, then that would suck pretty fucking bad. But Sonic Advance is one of them old-fashioned games, and a single playthrough will only last you about an hour. So, having to restart the game entirely doesn't necessarily make you want to kill yourself. Well, not any more than you may already want to do. Thing is that despite the game improving on some things, I still found myself doing a lot of awkward platforming and finding power-ups in locations where it just doesn't make any sense to put them there. Like, in a way, it almost seems like Sonic Team kinda stopped giving a shit after they made Sonic and Knuckles. I mean, in Sonic CD, there were rings placed inside of the walls, and in Knuckles Chaotix, the level design was just a bit meh. And Sonic 3D Blast was, well... And while it's true that this game doesn't really have any of that, it still feels like not a whole lot of thought was put into these levels to make shit flow better. Like I said, plenty of people have argued that Sonic's game design was flawed right from the get-go. And I do think that there's quite some truth to that sentiment. But, just like most other Sonic games, the opening stage is pretty fucking excellent. The art design is striking and really colorful, the music fits perfectly, and the controls don't feel quite as stiff as they did in the older games. Overall, it's fast, streamlined, and just designed pretty darn well. But after that, things start getting complicated. In the Sonic Adventure games, it was the introduction of gimmicks and random mechanics, and in the 2D games, it was often the maze-like level design that took all the flow out of the platforming. And while I do know that a skilled player can get a lot more out of this, as once you know the levels, you can foresee a lot of shit easier, I still kind of feel like that for the game to have been designed well, you should be able to do that right from the get-go. As once again, right after the first stage, I found myself running into things more than I found myself, well, running. And Sonic's momentum certainly doesn't help either. Thing is that when Sonic starts running, he starts off running slowly. On a flat plane, building up speed like this feels great, as it does in the first level. But when shit starts getting complicated and more obstacles start happening, I keep finding myself with less windows to be able to rev up and go fast. So I ended up slowly and quite frankly awkwardly jumping platforms and running into items. And the fact that Sonic needs to be in ball form to either hurt or break things doesn't help at all, as this even turns the power-up containers into obstacles because I kept bumping into them, grinding to a full stop instantly. It's just... I don't know. I did enjoy the game, and I like other games in the franchise as well, but it's just hard for me not to pick up on this shit when it just constantly feels like the game is trying to slow me down. And I don't think a Sonic game should feel like that. Now, a lot of these arguments can very well be refuted by saying,
going fast is the goal you are meant to strive towards. Of course the game is going to present obstacles to slow you down. It is a game after all.
And, well, yeah, fair enough. But then I'm going to make the very petty and childish argument of, then this game just isn't fun. If the sole purpose of the level design is to keep you from doing the thing that makes this game, then I'd say that that's kind of a problem. especially when a lot of things do actually seem to be made in a way that they'd encourage you to go fast. The levels overall, though, just aren't really designed with that in mind. I mean, apart from all the shit I just mentioned, the game also tends to constantly change the direction it wants you to go. The problem with this is that it tends to slow you down more often than not, as holding left while going right will obviously make you grind to a halt, and there usually isn't enough time to be able to adjust. In some instances, I'd even say that you'd be better off not touching the D-pad at all because you're just getting bounced all over the place anyway. And sure, I get that it looks exciting, and it's not like it's never any fun either, but switching directions like that is, again, something that just really goes against the theme of going fast.
However,
I feel that if the camera had been zoomed out a bit more, a lot of these issues would have been fixed, as you would actually be able to see a lot of these obstacles coming and react accordingly. Things like the spike pits, the power-up containers, the hordes of enemies flying around, and even the sudden changes in direction would no longer be an issue. But now, the only thing you have to rely on is track memorization. And I think that that's why a lot of people tend to remember these games as fondly as they do. I mean, I like Sonic the Hedgehog 2 because I know it very well. The trapdoors in Chemical Plant Zone don't bug me, the levers and cheap pits in Mystic Cave Zone don't bother me, and all the random dead stops in Hilltop Zone aren't an issue for me either, because I know they are there. I can see them coming because I know they are there. And that's when the game starts becoming fun, when you know the levels like the back of your own pocket. Despite everything though, the game does definitely have its charm, but it's just hard for me not to pick up on all of the shit I just mentioned. I still had fun, sure, especially early on, but as the game continued, it slowly became an exercise in tedium because of its design. Still, at the end of the day, I guess it just kinda depends on how you like to play these. I mean, going fast really requires a lot of knowledge of the game's levels, and I can imagine that getting good could be pretty rewarding as you're able to just blast through the game like a madman. And as far as a sense of speed goes, it is done much better than any of the original 2D Sonic games, and that's pretty great. But at the same time, the fact that the game kind of punishes you for going fast just isn't really my cup of tea. And the reason why I tend to see that as a flaw more than anything is because I think Sonic Team never really did any of that on purpose. Like I said, right from the get-go, there was something fundamentally flawed about Sonic's design. Whether this was due to miscommunication within the dev team or between the devs and the marketing department is beyond me, but now it just seems like they're stuck with these design choices they made years ago, and this is just what Sonic is now, despite if that's what they really wanted him to be. And hey, if you're cool with that, then I can totally understand, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't have a good time at all. Also, Sonic Advance 2 actually does fix a lot of these problems by focusing on speed and adding tons of rails and slides, and even having some bosses based around speed as a mechanic as well. But still, it is just kind of a shame that this game isn't quite the masterpiece that Sonic Boom is.